At 7:12 a.m., my doorbell camera caught something I will never forget. Tamsin Crowley, our HOA president, was standing at my fence wearing yoga pants and a bicycle helmet. She was trying to scale my 6-foot privacy fence with a stepladder that had property of Birch Ridge tennis courts stamped on the side in faded letters. She made it about halfway up before my thorn hedge introduced itself to her in the most dramatic way possible. The footage captured sounds like Velcro being ripped apart mixed with a wood chipper grinding through branches. Then, right as she was dangling there tangled up, my sprinkler timer clicked on with perfect comedic timing. I couldn't have scripted it better if I tried. Let me back up and explain how we got here. My name is Marcus Hale, and I'm what you'd call a quiet homeowner. I live on a corner lot in Birch Ridge Preserve, one of those suburban neighborhoods where everyone knows everyone's business. I spend my weekends reading paperbacks in my hammock, maintaining a compost bin that actually doesn't smell like death, and communicating with my neighbors through the sacred language of polite nods and brief waves. My backyard is my personal sanctuary. I've got a beautiful koi pond that I built myself, a cedar pergola where I drink my morning coffee, and a thick hedge of heirloom hawthorn and blackberry canes that keeps out raccoons, deer, and nosy neighbors alike. Then there's Tamsin Crowley. She's the HOA president, and her voice sounds like someone blowing a whistle through a keyhole. She carries her clipboard holstered on her belt like it's a sheriff's badge. One morning, I found a cheerful notice in my mailbox that read randomized backyard compliance inspection scheduled for Tuesday 7 a.m. Please ensure entry is available. I read it, chuckled, and sent back a polite email that simply said no thanks, I decline. Apparently, Tamsin read my response as an invitation to practice parkour. What followed was a campaign of petty harassment that would make a parking enforcement officer blush. Tamsin began warming up her violation ticket printer and churning out notices. First, she claimed my ornamental pond might entice geese, even though we've never had geese in this neighborhood. Then she decided my compost bin had what she called an expressive hue. My personal favorite was when she wrote me up for unapproved wind chime tonality. Yes, you heard that right. She claimed my wind chimes clashed with the neighborhood's acoustic palette. I didn't even know we had an acoustic palette. She started showing up near my side gate with a measuring tape, eyeing my pergola suspiciously. She actually used the phrase height hubris in one of her violation notices. Then she slipped a note through my mail slot that read backyard inspection is non-optional per subclause 8C. When I looked up subclause 8C, it turned out to be a photocopy of some random blog post she'd found online. It wasn't even part of our actual HOA bylaws. I decided to take action. I installed a privacy screen right along my fence line, which was completely approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Then I posted a very polite but crystal clear "No trespassing /do not enter" sign on my gate. Both were within my rights and within HOA rules. Tamsin's response was to form something she called the Green Team, whose mission was to inspect water features for what she called mosquito extremism. The entire Green Team consisted of Tamsin in a sun visor carrying a mason jar. Inspection day arrived. I had declined entry by email, by certified mail, and even with a sticky note on my gate just to cover all my bases. Tamsin showed up anyway at dawn with her stolen tennis court ladder and a body camera strapped to her chest. I could hear her through my window narrating like she was hosting a true crime podcast. She said subject has failed to comply with inspection protocols. I am initiating lawful inspection. It was absurd. I watched through my doorbell camera as she hauled that ladder over to my fence. She completely ignored the "No trespassing" sign that was posted at eye level. She positioned the ladder, started climbing, and that's when nature took its course. The hawthorn branches hooked into her shirt like fishing lures. The blackberry canes wrapped around her ankle and started braiding themselves through her sock. A bougainvillea vine found a particularly tender spot that evolution apparently forgot to armor. She let out a yelp that probably woke up half the block, slipped on the ladder rung, and wedged herself into the hedge like a cat stuck in Venetian blinds. The best part? She actually called 911 to report what she called a homeowner-instigated trap. She was screaming into her phone about how I deliberately planted dangerous vegetation to assault HOA officials. Right as she was mid-sentence with the dispatcher, my sprinklers kicked on. They're on a timer, same schedule every Tuesday morning at 7:15 a.m., and they misted her like she was a misbehaving houseplant. My security cameras, which I have at the front, side, and one dome camera overlooking the koi pond recorded every single second in glorious high definition. Officer Wrangle was the first responder to arrive. He's a veteran cop who has probably seen everything, but even he looked bewildered when he pulled up to find our HOA president dangling from my thorn bushes while getting lightly misted by sprinklers. He looked at her, looked at me standing calmly on my porch with a cup of coffee, and asked me very directly if I had invited her onto my property. I pressed play on my doorbell app and let him watch the footage. There was Tamsin, giving a full narration to her body camera about breaching my backyard, followed by her spectacular bramble baptism in real time. I showed Officer Wrangle the NO trespassing sign, my approved fence installation plans, and the email where Tamsin had written, "I will enter your property regardless of your objections." He helped extract her from the hedge, carefully removing 3 hawthorn thorns that had formed what I can only describe as an exploratory committee in her cardigan. Then, and this was beautiful, he cited her for criminal trespass and misuse of emergency services. Her face went from red with rage to white with shock in about 2 seconds. That's when code enforcement showed up. Tamsin had apparently called them too, expecting them to find some kind of swamp situation that violated health codes. Instead, they found a crystal-clear koi pond with proper filtration, and I had my mosquito dunk purchase receipt ready to show them. They measured my pergola with their official equipment. It was legal by 2 inches. Then they measured her ladder and noticed the city property stamps from the tennis courts. Turns out she'd borrowed it without permission. The HOA treasurer arrived about 20 minutes later. Tamsin had sent out a group text to the board claiming there was an emergency situation requiring immediate response. He showed up in flip-flops and a bathrobe with the expression of a man who had just discovered the cookie jar was actually full of subpoenas. When he saw Tamsin sitting in the back of the police car getting her statement taken, still picking thorns out of her clothes, he just put his head in his hands. That evening's emergency HOA meeting was standing room only. Word had spread through the neighborhood faster than gossip at a high school reunion. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Tamsin limped onto the clubhouse stage wearing band-aids like polka dots all over her arms. She tried to maintain her authority and introduced a motion to fine me for what she called aggressive horticulture. The treasurer cleared his throat loudly, walked up to the microphone, and put Officer Wrangle's incident report up on the projector screen, followed by my complete security footage. The entire room watched in silence as Tamsin narrated her own ladder heist in full 1080p high-definition video. Someone in the back whispered, "Is she trying to rob his fence?" A few people started laughing. The laughter grew. Tamsin's face turned the color of a fire engine. The city's code enforcement officer, who had been invited to speak, very politely explained the concepts of property easements, consent, and how hedges that have been growing in place for 3 years are not legally considered booby traps just because they have thorns. Then our HOA attorney stood up. He's a man who looks like he bills clients by the sigh, and he was sighing a lot that evening. He announced that the association's liability insurance carrier had frozen our coverage pending a full investigation into the president's activities. You could have heard a pin drop. Someone made a motion to remove Tamsin as president. It passed with only 1 vote against it, and that was Tamsin voting for herself. Someone else made a motion to reimburse me for my damaged hedge and pay my legal consultation fees. That passed unanimously. A third motion to bar HOA officials from using ladders on private property was carried with actual laughter and applause. 3 weeks later, Tamsin appeared in court. She took a plea deal on the criminal trespass charge and the false emergency report. The judge sentenced her to pay a fine of $3,200, which is roughly the cost of a mid-tier patio furniture set, and 80 hours of community service. The community service assignment was poetic justice at its finest. She was ordered to trim invasive thorny brush along county roadsides, supervised by the Parks and Recreation Department. The court also issued a 1-year no-contact order that specifically listed my fence, my pond, my mailbox, and per my lawyer's creative flourish, any object reasonably calculated to enable vertical ingress. That means ladders, step stools, and the judge actually said gymnastic creativity. When the judge read that final part, Tamsin's mouth fell open and she just stood there staring in complete disbelief at the consequences of her own actions.